Perfect. And again, I'm really happy that after weeks of trying to make this happen, we finally made it. We finally made it, bro. Um, Nima, the man that has lived many lives, I would say. the man that
E26, not that many.
the man that has literally lived a bazillion lifetimes, because he has had some incredible stories that even some people at the age of 30, 35 didn't even get the chance to witness them. So Nima, how are you doing, my man?
I'm good. I'm good. I'm glad we made it because, like you said, we've been trying to make this work for a while, but I've been looking
Yeah,
forward to this conversation. So, yeah, I'm ready to go.
I think this is always the beauty of being able to talk with people from all around the world. I think there's always a difficult part to it, and there is an ease part to it, because you get to connect with people from all around the world. But you got to keep always in mind that there's different time zones included. I've had conversations with Daniel, who is like on the West Coast. I've had last week someone who's on the East Coast. Then I had someone who's tuning in from Singapore, and it's always so difficult to like keep all of the world map time zones in check, and then like knowing, okay, where's Nima right now? Okay, UK, where's that? Okay, -1 hour. All right, we got this. So I'm really happy that we now finally made it work, Nima. And like I said, the man who has lived many lives. I'm pretty sure that the audience is not really ready yet for whatever you have to share. But maybe just quickly, how we both got into touch was through my good friend Daniel, who actually reached out to me one day and said, "Yo, I have someone that you need to talk to on your podcast. This guy has literally lived incredible experiences." And I said, you know what? I'm the type of guy, I love digging into people's lives and people's stories. And I think this is what this podcast is all about. So, Nima, tell the audience a little bit about who you are before we dive into what you have been through.
Who am I? I guess, I was raised in the UK, in London. My family's from Iran. And yeah, I just was raised in London and I was just always very curious. I say I'm a very open-minded person who always wants to explore and discover and experience many different things. And that curiosity basically dictates the flow of my life. So I say that's
Mm,
who I am in a nutshell.
that's who you are in a nutshell. I mean, so what led you to backpacking across the entire, north, south, and probably North American plain, and actually experience the things that you've experienced? How did you? Because in today's episode, I want to talk with you specifically about one experience that you've made traveling through Ecuador and actually encountering indigenous tribes, the indigenous tribe of the Waorani tribe, and actually living there and working with them, living with them, and that entire story behind how did that come to pass? I mean, you're a boy from the UK. What are you doing in Ecuador? What are you doing backpacking in Ecuador?
Yeah.
And what is the story that led you to that point?
Yeah, I mean, it sounds random, but for me in my mind, it's actually not random at all. And maybe as I explain it, it will make sense. But like up until the age of 18, most of us were kind of raised by our parents, right, in our own little bubbles. And I was, reached a point of like 18, 19, and I was just observing, I was in a very bubbled part of London, like middle class and people with nice jobs, and I didn't really know what goes on in the world. And as I started to know that actually what goes on in the world isn't actually a big reflection of my like inner circle, I got curious about what's there to see. And particularly what kind of struck me was when I was like 18, 19, was I was just seeing all of these wealthy people around me who like had issues, like alcoholism or depression
Mm-hmm.
or stress, or
Mm-hmm.
their kids were going off the wrong road. And I was like, wow, if it's like this, like life is challenging, if you like, for people in, nice part of London, what's it like in other parts of the world, right? So I got fascinated by the subject of happiness. So I thought, well, I want to go see like what a completely different system of life is like and see, do they struggle as much as us or do they live differently? So I got fascinated by hunter-gatherer tribes. And so,
Mm.
the natural quest was to go on a mission to the Amazon and see what's there to learn and see there. So that's how it all came about.
That's pretty crazy. So, were you alone? Were you with a group of friends? And did you just say like, "Hey, I just want to go to the Amazonian rainforest," or was there like a specific touching point that you had in mind when that came about?
Yeah, so the first time it was actually yeah, I went alone. Okay, I went alone
Hmm.
when I was 19, yes, and the first year of university. I went to Ecuador for 1 month, and I backpacked around the country. But then there was like 1 week of it which was devoted to going to the Amazon. And like I really like researched, wanted to make sure I go like on the best like company expedition, etc. I went, and I was disappointed. It was cool, like obviously, being the Amazon for the first time, hearing the sounds of the monkeys and birds and everything. But I
Hmm.
was like,
Hmm.
I'm not that deep in the jungle. Like I'm an hour away or 2 hours away from civilization. I'm
Yeah.
sleeping in like a bed which is bigger than my own bed in my parents' house. There's air conditioning, and there's no tribes or indigenous people. So I was like, okay, cool. This is the Amazon, but like this is tourist Amazon. So I went and I was
Yeah.
disappointed. So that was the first time. Um, and
Hmm.
after that experience, I told myself, well, I'm definitely gonna have to come back again at some point. And I couldn't do it right away because I had to go back to university. So I was like,
Hmm.
I'm definitely gonna come back at some point and go to the real Amazon, if you like, in my mind, where it's like uncharted territory. So I left that trip knowing I'm gonna come back.
Hmm. Wow. And how long did it take you then to come back?
1 year later,
Yeah,
so I
because
came back.
I can imagine as a student you're kind of restricted in a certain way, by your schedule, by money, by so on, so on. So I think 1 year is like a reasonable time frame to say like, all right, I got 1 year of planning now. So within that process, because I feel you. I feel you. And I can imagine this is the problem that a lot of tourists go under is like you have these schemy companies that are selling you the Amazonian rainforest. But if you think about the Amazon, it's such a huge, like it's very hard to imagine how big the Amazon is. And if you want to see
Eight
the
countries.
Amazon, 8 countries, right? And if you want to see the Amazon and you jump on the wrong kind of wagon, the one kind of touristic scam, well, of course you get to see the Amazon, but like not really the Amazon. So I can imagine I would have been probably really bummed out as well if I would have got to see like because at the end of it, we've all probably watched a lot of documentaries about the Amazonian rainforest, right? We
Mhm.
see the brown rivers, we see that it's not the prettiest, right? It's probably the feeling that you get there, like the 95% air humidity, the noises, the sounds, the mosquitoes. Like, this is the real feel, right? But for someone like you, and I suppose I would have probably gone in a similar direction for someone like me as well, you need the real feel. You need that little bit of adrenaline rush, that little bit of like, wow, okay, what's happening here? So this is actually the action that I'm looking for. So when you got back a year later, what was your approach? I
Yeah,
bet you went like straight,
yeah,
straight to the source.
yeah. So I just thought to myself, like, who can get me to those places? Because there's one thing reaching the point within yourself, having that desire, right, to go
Hmm.
really deep in the
Hmm.
Amazon. You can have that desire, but then to actually take action, you have to overcome like the mental obstacle in your head, which is like, this is dangerous, this is uncertain, my mom and dad don't want me to do it. And then once you even overcome the limiting beliefs in your mind, you then actually need to find a vehicle through which you can get there. Because you can't, like can't like call an Uber, right? And be like, take me there. So that was where I got to. And what I decided to do was um in Ecuador and a lot of countries in Latin America, you have basically military posts
Hmm.
all over the place. And so where the like different entries to the Amazon, but there's like different cities kind of bordering the entrance of the Amazon. So I went to the military post there, and I spoke to them, and I said, "Look, I want to go deep to in the Amazon to where the tribes are." And I had a feeling they know these areas because through the Amazon there's a lot of petrol trafficking, drug trafficking, all of those different things. So I knew the
Of
military
course.
have some kind of spatial awareness of how to navigate the Amazon because they're always doing trips there. So I spoke with them and they kind of thought I was crazy. But money talks, right? Like these
Hmm.
guys, like in Ecuador, I think if you're in the military, you earn like $300 a month, right? So
Hmm.
they connected me to the Navy post, and it was a guy called Ochoa or Washington, but his nickname was Ochoa, 72-year-old man, but like unbelievably fit. And they said
Hmm.
he is the guy for you to go with. So I spoke with him, and basically we came to an agreement that like let's go for the next 3 weeks through the Amazon, almost all the way through to the border with Peru, and
Hmm.
stay with different communities along this
Wow.
3 week period. And then
Wow.
within 24 hours, I was in like I guess you can call it a supermarket. Very like not the kind we associate with, but like
Hmm.
buying my last Western things, right? to get on this boat and embark on this 3.5 week journey with these kind of military and navy people into the Amazon.
Wow. So where does the Waorani tribe come into play? Because I can imagine 3 weeks along through the Amazon rainforest is like 3 weeks. I can imagine is like long hours on a boat
Mm,
driving through the Amazon and then stopping after like a couple of hours of riding that boat, stopping somewhere, encountering, getting to know them. Like how is that entire experience, or how was that entire experience for you? Because I've one of the documentaries that you sent me is like to reach the destination that you wanted to be in, you had to be on that boat for like 10 hours plus. Like, how was that entire
yeah,
experience for you traveling from place to place? Because I can imagine the Amazonian rainforest is as you imagine it. It's moist, it's humid, it's filled with mosquitoes. It's like completely unbeknownst to like what we in Europe or the UK know. So how was that as like a cultural or climate shock for you? How was that for
yeah.
you?
Good question. I think I went in with a bit of ignorance in terms of the time on the boat, right? So I didn't
Mm-hmm.
realize, now it's kind of obvious in hindsight, but I
Mm-hmm.
didn't realize, gosh, like how much I'm just going to be sat on a boat like the whole time, getting from A to B and B to C and C to D. And you know what? At first, it was great because it was just new, right? And exciting. And I was just
Mm-hmm.
looking at the
Mm-hmm.
nature. But then it gets taxing, right? It's just uncomfortable. And the other thing I didn't encounter for was, my gosh, like when it rains. And we were on this tiny boat, like this boat, and you can't even call it a boat. Like it's basically they chop down a tree, right? And then with their hands, they scrape the inside of the tree trunk, if you can kind of visualize that. So you're left with like
Yeah.
a boat, right? And then they put like a Suzuki engine on it. And our engine was like a 15cc engine, which is like super weak, right? And
Super weak and super loud, I can imagine.
oh, so loud.
Yeah.
Gosh, yes,
Yeah.
so loud. It was so annoying.
Yeah.
And when, it was rainy season as well, and we like almost capsized several times. Like there were several points where I was completely oblivious to this was part of the procedure. I thought I just have to sit in the boat. They would
Mm-hmm.
be like, Nima, you need to jump out of the boat right now and start pushing it. Or like we'd be cruising and then we'd hit, I don't know, like a rock or tree trunk in the water. So I didn't realize how much time I'd have to spend outside of the boat in the river, just
Mm-hmm.
like pushing the
Mm-hmm.
boat. Or when
Mm-hmm.
it would rain, it's so torrential the rain, the boat would start filling up with water, right? And you need to get that water out of the boat, or otherwise that
Wow.
boat's gonna flip. So I didn't realize
Wow.
how hands-on it's gonna be. I thought I had taken some books with me, right? I literally thought I'm gonna sit on this boat and read books. So yeah,
You,
I was
you
just I went with
thought
ignorance. Yeah.
you thought still from that kind of like first world country type of ideology. Well, I'm a tourist still. I do pay them a lot of money to get an incredible experience, but I'm still a tourist, so let me enjoy this trip like a tourist. And I guess when it comes to the hard truth of being in the rainforest, that's not how it goes, right? It's like you got to drop all of your privileges and you got to put hands on to actually arrive where you want to arrive. Because I can imagine those nutshells with a Suzuki engine on it. They're not that stable, and I can imagine food runs out pretty fast too. So you have to like find out like
Yeah, we
how to
lost
kind of,
we lost an engine as well at one point. The engine literally fell into the river.
and you don't want to go digging for that. You don't
Yeah.
want to go digging for that. Crazy, man, crazy. Um, so you're in the rainforest now, right? You're in the rainforest now. What were like on that trip? Because I guess we're slowly leading up to the point where you encountered that tribe for the first time, and how you started working together with them, which I find super incredible. From that one idea of I just want to experience over to, hey, I can actually make an impact. So, what were some of the lessons that you learned along the way while you were driving in that tree trunk with a Suzuki engine?
hmm What lessons did I learn whilst we were getting there? I
Yeah.
think it was just well, that how dependent we are in the West of like luxuries, right? Because there was no obviously sanitation system whilst on this journey. I was sleeping, at the nights we were sleeping in a tent with no pillow and no blanket. Um, Food, right? Like just the convenience, like we just had a rational amount of food and we had to make do. And then
Hmm.
also the psychology of it becoming night, and obviously there's no like lights from the street or anything there, and it's like I don't even know. I forgot what pitch black looks like, and it was kind of like
Hmm.
a bit intense, right? You're just sleeping in a
Hmm.
tent, and it's pitch black, and you're just hearing noises. But it was just so cool that it just felt very trippy, to be honest with you. So I guess the lessons I learned was just how much like home is so detached from like how life used to be. And the best example I can say is like we never really see true darkness because there's always lights coming from somewhere. So for me, that
Hmm.
was super cool to like be in literal pitch black.
And I can imagine like us sitting now in a room where either you can open a window when it's too warm, or you can hide out light like heat up the heating system when it's too cold. I think that privilege kind of drops pretty fast as well once you're in that
Yeah,
real life type of situation.
yeah,
Yeah,
for sure, for
that's
sure. And I
crazy.
think the one which hit me was like the biggest wake up call. Like, wow, this is different. Was as we were navigating through the Amazon, obviously you get thirsty, right? And we had
Hmm.
bought we had like these big containers of 15 liters of water each. But again, you just never know if it's enough, right? And
Hmm.
obviously,
Hmm.
you might be thinking, why don't you just bring loads of water? And the issue is water's heavy, right? Like 15 liters to 15 kilos. So you want to keep the boat light. So anyways, they were leaving the water for me. And like the
Hmm.
Navy guys and the Army guys, they would literally just get a cup and put it in the river, like the brown, dirty water, and just drink it straight.
Uh, uh,
And for me, I was just
uh,
crazy, just like watching these
uh.
guys, and not like getting a cup and like slowly, like not like like
I
slowly, like
gotta
they
make
would really
sure.
make it like it was a pint, like no, like it's chill.
Jesus. I think if once you live there and you've been through the first years of their gut biome just looks entirely different to ours.
Yeah,
They can just handle different stuff, right? Wow.
for
Kudos
sure,
to them. Kudos to them. So
absolutely.
at what point, because you've mentioned specifically when we first talked, you've mentioned specifically the Waorani tribe.
Yeah,
At what point on your journey did they come into play?
yeah. So to be honest, a bit later on because this guy like didn't know the most efficient route, I guess. And at that point, I hadn't specifically said take me to the. I had said I want to go to the Warani, okay, but he
Okay.
was kind of a bit apprehensive because if you kind of speak about the Warani in Ecuador, people kind of look at you like, oh my gosh, like they're dangerous. They have a reputation of when they got founded in like the 1960s, or they would just like literally kill anyone, of just being
Mm,
extremely aggressive. So people kind of are still caught up with that thought. So he kind of like went this long route where we avoided the Warani at first. But eventually we got to them, and I'd say in that 3 week trip, it was around day 8 when we got to them.
okay. Crazy, because I read a little bit about the Waorani clan as well, and to be honest with you, I was not aware of them before we first spoke, so I had to dig and Google a little bit as well, and it's very interesting to see. I mean, there are a lot of different tribes, I guess, but the Waorani are the ones who had like the at a certain point the most contact to the outside world, and a lot of foreigners went there to kind of like learn and live with them, and it's very beautiful to see how deeply they are connected with nature and how it's just so beautiful to see that old way of living, like how they're old hunter gatherers, how the way that they get their food every single day, the way they know the nature, the way they know the flora and the fauna around them. I think
Mhm.
it's such an interesting tribe to get to. So but was that the only tribe that you encountered?
No, the first few days we were going through with like the Sequoia people. There
Hmm.
was the Kofan as well, because I mean, I think there's, gosh, I have to remember now. I think there's 11 different, they call it nativos, like
Hmm.
indigenous groups in Ecuador. So you have Sequoia, Kofan, Guarani, Juruni. Like there's so many, well, not that many, but
Hmm.
11. So like we went to the Sequoias and Kofans as well. But the one I really wanted to get to was the Guarani. And the reason why was because of two things. One was just, the whole adrenaline side of me where it was like, well, these are the most dangerous ones, so let's go there.
Hmm.
That was like the threat of
Hmm.
that was stealing. But the other main reason was were the closest to like still being like true hunter gatherers. Because the Sequoias, for example, they still hunt, but they use a shotgun. Whereas the
Hmm.
Warani use a blowgun, right? Like a blowpipe made from nature and using venom, which comes from a plant. So I really wanted to get to them because I was like, that is as close as it can get to like ancient civilization.
Yeah, known modern technology
Right.
whatsoever. No modern technology. So you went, you encountered on day 8 the Warani, right? Let's say now on a scale of 1 to Indiana Jones, like how epic would you say your first encounter with the Warani tribe actually was?
It was cool in a sense that you get like they hear the engine coming, right? And you can
Hmm.
imagine like basically never have visitors. So if they see like an engine running, all like, I guess there's a bit of excitement, like, oh, there's a visitor, but also a bit of fear, right? Like, who is this? And I just get there and like a whole bunch of kids start running. And kind of like I think people will hear this and will be like, yeah, I can imagine that. Like you've seen in documentaries, right? Whether it be like you're in some remote area in Latin America or some remote area in Africa, like you're associated with like kids smiling and running up to you. It was kind of
Hmm.
like that. And yeah, it was super cool. And that was like the first interaction. And basically, like the community has, I think, 120 different people, and they have a chief. And so, like, the chief came, and he has a lot of pride, a very proud man, and
Hmm.
basically wanted to know like why I'm here and what I'm up to. And so I explained, and they welcomed me with open arms, and they gave me like a hut to stay in, and yeah, they looked after me. Oh, and actually, the first things I get there, and obviously, just like here, normally people want to give guests food. It was no different there, except the kind of food I
Interesting.
was welcomed with. So when I got there within 30 minutes, they were about to assassinate a turtle, right? And it was being cooked, and I obviously it'd be rude for me not to eat it. So that was the
Hmm.
first hour of getting there.
So that is actually one topic that I would love to get into in a little bit as well. When it comes to food and what you've tried, what you've eaten, their entire way of life, right? But first things first, I think I forgot to ask that before. Um, do you speak Spanish? Were
Mhm.
you able to? Okay, so you were able to communicate them with them in their language, right? And you were there were no barriers to entry when it came to communication.
Yeah, because basically, in a nutshell, they have their own indigenous language, but the
Hmm.
Guarani got discovered in 1960, and the story basically all of these communities, um, missionaries went to these communities, and a lot of the times they disguised beyond the face of religion to
Hmm.
get like build rapport with these communities, right? So kind of like giving them gifts and solar panels and even Wi-Fi and mobile phones and things like that to get them on their side, and then talking to them about God, and then essentially exploiting the land for resources. So in that process of them being contacted, they learned Spanish, right? So I'd say now the older guys don't really speak Spanish, but the
Hmm.
younger ones and like the I guess like 30-year-olds and stuff, they it's not perfect, but they speak Spanish. So with them, yeah, I was able to communicate in Spanish.
Cool. So I can imagine you arrived there. And how long was your first stay with them?
Um, I think it was a good 10 days.
A good 10 days. So walk me through those 10 days, right? So you finally meet the tribe that you really want to meet because they seem the most dangerous and they seem the most, back to the roots type of tribe life.
Mhm.
And what is going through your mind? Because I think by that time you have been through that entire Amazonian like experience already. Like were you still as excited as you were before when you started that trip, or what was that entire experience once you went through there? Because I can imagine the Amazon in a certain way takes a toll on you. um, and how then was that experience that you had with the Warani? Like walk me through the first couple of days, walk me through the first couple of encounters with them and how you befriended them, how you got closer to them. I would really love to hear and to know like how that experience is like, because like I said, it's not like you're meeting somewhere, some people on a night out somewhere in London, right? It's not like you're going out and you just talk to a stranger and you get into conversation about work, life, whatsoever, and it's cool, and then you part off again. So yeah, like for me and for the listeners out there listening right now, like walk us through that entire experience, the first couple of days leading up into your first departure.
Yeah. So I think, as when I first got there, I was just exhausted, right? And it was already the evening. So I just wanted to sleep. And I had this mixed feeling of excitement because I finally got to where I wanted to get to. And many people had told me you won't be able to get there. Right? Like you'll get killed, you'll die. So one was like kind of like a fuck you guys, I made it, right?
Hmm.
Um, but there was also, the kind of me which is like, gosh, this is a bit intense. Like just in this community with all of these locals, if you like, tribal men and women.
Hmm.
I'm
Hmm.
just like really sticking out here. And like no shower. That was the big one when I first got there. I was like the reality of like, wow, like I can't shower. Like I'm so hot and sticky. And I mean I can only shower in the river. And also like the sleeping situation. Like I was sleeping on a wooden floor. I didn't even have a sleeping mat or anything. So
Hmm.
just like sleeping on a wooden floor was just crazy. So it's this mixed feeling of excitement, but also realizing this is going to be a bit mentally challenging. But I think the excitement of everything kind of outweighed it. And I remember like kind of as I kind of like woke up the first morning, my whole thing was I want to see how they hunt. That was what I was most curious about. I was like, this is so cool and different, right? I want to see how they hunt. But I was also mindful of the fact that these communities, they basically associate all visitors with taking advantage of them because that's just all they've ever known. So I was like, I'm gonna have to really come up with a strategy on how to build rapport with these people. And that excited me. I liked that because, I think my thing in normal life is I'd say I'm good with people, right? So it felt like
Hmm.
the
Hmm.
ultimate challenge, right? How good am I with people? Am I that good with people that I can even get in with these people?
Yeah,
I kind of saw it as a challenge. So that was the main thing. It's like I want to go hunting with these guys, but I also need to get in with them and like coming up with a way of how I can do that.
because that would be one that is actually one question that I had for you. If like if you witnessed any cultural clashes slash misunderstanding slash miscommunications between you and the Waranis, um, and how like what were some of the strategies that you came up with, because I can imagine your native tongue is not Spanish, their native tongue is not Spanish either, so there is an entire world in between that communication that can somehow be misunderstood. So um is it more the words they use? Is it a lot of gesticulation, a lot of handwork that you can kind of like use in that form of communication? Like walk me through that.
I feel like smiling is a global currency, which is understood, right?
Wow.
There you go.
Wow.
And I think that went a long way. And
Hmm.
I think the way I try to like show the people that I'm a good person
Hmm.
was by getting in with their kids first. So let me explain that. So I had taken a football with me. So, if I'm like, how can I build a bond with someone? What's easier? Like, go chuck a ball with some kid and play with them and like get the kids laughing, or like
Hmm.
try sit down with one of like the adults and have a conversation. I was like, it's definitely easier to do it through the kids. So I took this football with me and I started playing football with the kids and they started laughing and I started spinning them around. And then like their parents came and like watched us all playing together and I saw them smiling on the touchline, if you like. So I was like, okay, cool, this is going well.
Wow.
So I basically used, and it wasn't intentional, I don't think. It just kind of happened. But in hindsight, I used the kids as a tool through which to break the ice. And there you go again.
Mm.
Like I said, smiling is a global currency, football as well. It's just,
Yeah,
it's a global sport.
I
You
guess
get a ball in front of the kids, they'll start kicking it and having a good time.
I guess it makes sense because in a certain way, when foreigners come to indigenous tribes and their purpose or their intent is to exploit them, I think even those elderly people, when they think about their land and their culture, they don't think about themselves at first, but they think about their next generation, like their children. So I can imagine the contact that you have with the younger generations tells them a lot about how you can work with the chief or the elder generations, right?
Exactly.
That's a beautiful way. So how did you then how did you break the ice? So do you think, would you say the ice was broken then
Yeah,
once you bonded with the kids?
yeah, because
Okay.
then the parents started playing too. Because like what I
Ah,
realized is
fun,
like
fun.
over there is kind of like Peter Pan. I don't know if you know that film, but like you're always a
Hmm.
kid. Like even like the 60, 70-year-old men, they just because they don't take it's not as serious as our life. So that everyone's just like a big kid. So they all started like playing around and then jumping in the river and splashing each other. So it just felt like a whole group of big babies, big kids, just
Wow.
having a good time.
I'm just thinking. I'm just thinking. Does this say something about their connectedness with life? If you take life too serious, because life itself is not serious, right? Life itself involves certain ground rules, certain principles, certain values that you have to keep, that are very linear in a certain
That's
way.
true.
But if you want to enjoy life and live a happy life, I think happiness comes a lot from staying young at your core, staying
Yeah.
young from your soul on. Would you say that resonates with it? Because how you do anything is how you do everything, right? So
Hmm.
if the kids, they know already how to have fun and how to enjoy themselves, and the adults, they just can come along, and there's not this like, all right, we got to do adult stuff now, but we can as well have some fun. What does this say about indigenous tribes and their way of living, would
Well,
you say?
I can only speak about my experience with the Warani, but I believe what it taught me about happiness was more that over there, here happiness is often conditional on ascertaining some kind of future outcome. Like we're such a vision-driven society or goal-driven society, which is great. But I think it's just our relationship with our vision, where it's kind of
Hmm.
like our happiness is conditional on fulfilling that vision. Whereas and so you're constantly in pursuit of that, and so you don't enjoy the moment. And when you ascertain goal X, it's kind of like anticlimactic, and you got that. And so what I learned with like my experience with Warani was their happiness is not conditional on something occurring in the future because they wake up and they have goals too, but their goals are same day, right? Like I wake up today, my goal is where am I going to find my firewood for today? Or where am I
Hmm.
going to find my source of meat for today,
Hmm.
right? Or
Hmm.
clean water. So you have goals too, but the cycle is much shorter. It's kind of like the same day. And so you don't get trapped in your mind thinking about, oh, like I've got to do this next week or in 6 months' time, I need to hit X goal so I can do this. It's just literally living day to day. And I think that was what was powerful. Their mind is just a lot more free and liberated.
Hmm. So what does that say about our society? If we can take a little detour
Yeah.
from the tribal life, what does this say about us? Do
Mm.
you do you think like the more consumeristic we go, the more we lose happiness in our life, or is it all about what you do with the money and the time and the power that you have that can actually make you enjoy this life? Because we always say like we were really happy as a species to have overcome this stage of survivalism, right? We are not in that stage anymore where we need to look every single day out for what we how we get at the food on our table, what we need to do to survive. This stage has kind of like passed in our modern society.
Yeah.
But at the same time, you see a very strong correlation between this ideology of like abundance in apostrophe marks and um, unhappiness, sadness,
Absolutely.
depression, stress, anxiety, uh, discomfort. So what is this? What can we learn from these indigenous tribes? It doesn't, I would say, and that's just my interpretation right now. I'm curious to hear what you think of it, because I guess you've not only lived through that experience, but many others too, and kind of
Right.
brought it back to the UK with you. I'm curious to hear, because I believe we don't need to go back to this
No.
simple like farmer's lifestyle, right? We don't have to. That would be a kind of like retraction in our evolutionary process. But kind of being more present with our nature, with our surrounding, kind of like indulging ourselves more into activities that are not so non-natural, like
Hmm.
kind of like go outside of the city skirts into the nature, spend more
Yeah.
time there, find like purpose, have like a purposeful life where you say, all right, today I want to XYZ, like you always
Yeah.
look forward to the next thing, and you want to indulge yourself into creative processes, I
Hmm.
would say,
Absolutely.
creating, crafting, doing something, right? So I'm curious to hear your take on that.
Yeah, I think it's exactly that. It's not so much like, oh, let's go back and live that way of life. Although my own opinion is, I do think it is a happier life. But having said that, I
Hmm.
don't believe like it's like the solution is go back to. I think it's more what did I observe and learn, and how can I integrate those lessons into this so-called modern life. So I
Hmm.
think that there's two different takeaways for me. One is, and I already touched on this slightly, but to go further, is don't make my happiness conditional on ascertaining certain goals or fulfilling my vision. Have the mindset of I'm really happy with where I'm at right now, right? Because like the hunter gatherers, I have my basics. I have my water, I have my shelter, I have my bed, I have my food, so I'm happy. But
Hmm.
if I achieve so and so goal, that's a bonus, right? And I think that's the difference for a lot of people. It's kind of like, but like where I'm at now, I'm not happy. I want to get to direction Y. Like I don't know, um, what that could be like for somebody. It could be like, okay, when I open my own company, I'm happy. Like maybe that's just a
Hmm.
goal someone says. So between now and opening such company, they're kind of like not happy because they've not achieved their goal and they're making their happiness completely conditional on opening that company. Whereas if we just had a mindset switch of being like, I'm super happy where I'm at now. You know, I've got a way of making money. I get my food, got my shelter, got my friends, whatever. But when I have a company, like that'll be a nice bonus. Like I'll be even happier as opposed to making it completely conditional on opening
Hmm.
such company. So I think that's one thing is that just that relationship with vision and goals. And I think, like, especially now, like in this society with our generation, Instagram, for example, really pushes that or influences like, what's your vision? What's your vision? What's your goal? And it kind of creates this insecurity for people like, oh, I don't even have the self awareness to know what my vision
Yeah,
and goals
yeah,
are. Or it makes people feel
100%.
like if I don't have a goal and a vision and I don't achieve it, I'm kind of like, you know, like I don't have a purpose, or I've not fulfilled my purpose, I'm like useless. Like it's like unless you achieve your purpose, you're not happy. And your purpose is always such a long-term thing. So
Hmm.
for me, it's also been like, as well as having like your, let's say your so-called purpose, right? For a few years down the line, is like set yourself daily goals, right? Like little dopamine hits, because that's essentially what it is, in my opinion. It's like when you achieve a so-called goal or target or vision or purpose, whatever you want to call it, you get like a dopamine hit because it's a sense of accomplishment. But don't like
100%.
make those, don't delay those dopamine hits for so many years down the line. Set yourself daily or weekly goals too, so you can feed yourself those dopamine hits. So that's kind of
Wow.
what it told me. The number one thing on our relationship with happiness and goal setting. The other
Hmm.
one was that it showed me that in the hunter-gatherer life, you know, they're great biohackers, right? We had natural ways of basically just secreting happiness hormones in our brain. I'll go into them, but basically dopamine, serotonin, adrenaline, right? Like natural hormones being secreted in our brain. The hunter-gatherer lifestyle would satisfy our desire to secrete those hormones.
Hmm.
And in the modern world, we've lost those natural mechanisms, so we're creating artificial ways to get the same hit. But to make that give more sense, so a human, right, needs the desire to secrete, have dopamine secreted in their brain to feel good. So as a hunter gatherer, you would get your dopamine hit when you would maybe like walk for 3, 4 hours in the jungle and you find some dry firewood. That gives you your dopamine hit.
Hmm.
Or, you know, your desire endorphins, right? You would get your hit of endorphins by going hunting, right? And like be climbing trees and running through rivers, you get your natural secretion of endorphins. Or adrenaline. We need to feel adrenaline in our lives. And when you've been going through a jungle and you find an animal and you're about to hunt it, right? You get that adrenaline hit. So these are all natural ways as a hunter gatherer we have these kind of happiness hormones secreted in our brain. And what I kind of observed is in the modern world, we've lost those natural ways. So we're creating artificial ways to secrete those hormones. I'll give you an example. We've lost our way of getting dopamine naturally secreted. So we flick around on a phone, liking things or posting something on Instagram and getting the artificial dopamine hit of likes. Or we need a sense of adrenaline, right? Like a hunter gatherer who's hunting. But we've lost that. So what do? I go drive my car like a crazy guy. So I get my primate need for adrenaline.
Yeah.
Or we need our hit of endorphins, which we've lost, right? Because we're not hunting anymore. So we go in some, you know, and when you think about it, it's kind of crazy. Like we go in some like man-made room, which has like a bunch of electronic machines and
Hmm.
fake rowing or fake running on a treadmill. So it's like we've lost all of these natural ways we used to secrete these different hormones in our brain. And in this society, we've created artificial ways to compensate for those things.
Hmm.
And often, in order in this modern world to you know get access to these hormone hits, it requires consumerism. Like, okay, so I need to spend money on a gym, or I need to like spend money on a car so I get my adrenaline hit. So it's just yeah, I just feel like we've basically overcomplicated
But
life.
do you
That's
think but do you think there's a way back? Or do you think there's a solution to that problem without needing to go and, I don't know, go into your forest and hunt a deer by yourself with an arrow and bow, or go, I don't know, with a stone gun, like hit squirrels out of the tree? Can you get your hits naturally without either or both ways that you described? Like,
Yeah,
what can people do?
yeah, I think, yeah, obviously, that would be extreme and it wouldn't be practical. I think, it's the same things which everyone knows because again, Instagram likes to tell people to do these things. But like I saw for myself, but I agree with it, which is just like, yeah, spend time in nature,
Hmm.
like go spend time in nature, spend time with your thoughts, right?
Hmm.
Um, Instead of maybe running on a treadmill, go actually like run in nature,
Yeah, go for
and
a
just
hike, go for a
yeah,
walk.
yeah, or like instead of going on a bicycle machine, just go on an actual bicycle
Yeah,
or yeah,
and
or
I do
on,
get it, and I do get it if you're living in a bigger city, and the next park or the next green is like, I don't know, half an hour or 45 minutes driving away. I get that, but if you have the chance of having still some nature around, even if it takes a little bit of time to get out there, because if the gym is 5 minutes away, or if the next forest is like 40 minutes away, people use usually the path of least resistance and they hit the gym, right? Because it's more
absolutely,
time efficient. Time is money, time is the currency, right? Like, but if you have the chance of actually, I feel really blessed because I have a forest right behind my house. So today, for
hey,
example, I've spent half of the day outside working, and I've listened to the birds coming out, and only listening to the birds and like walking barefoot through the forest for, I don't know, even if it's just 5 minutes, it just filled me up with so much dopamine. I felt so happy and re-energized, like just before we did this interview here, to get me into that right state of mind, you know? And
absolutely.
just those little things, those
Yes,
little
I think
things.
that's how we can incorporate it. I guess like how to realistic ways to incorporate it is exactly that. Like do more natural exercise, set up in the gym, spend time in nature. Um, and maybe just in your mind change your relationships with your goals. Like I said, like I
Hmm.
think that's an easy switch, but hardest. Like everyone can do it, but it's like actually making that switch in your mind can be challenging. But just like look at yourself honestly and be like, I'm happy with where I'm at. If I happen, like, I don't know, maybe you have a goal in your case that I want to grow my podcast to, I don't know, 1 million subscribers, right? I
Hmm.
don't like make your happiness conditional on that. Just be like, I'm super happy with how I'm at now because I get to speak to cool people as it is, and I've got a forest behind my house. But if I happen to hit 1 million subscribers, that'll be a nice bonus. But you're not gonna like make your happiness conditional on achieving that.
It's the process. And it's, I find it, thank you for touching on that, because this has been something that it took me a longer time, like over the last years, because I have been independent. I have been running like small marketing agencies. I've been in network marketing. I've been in direct sales. Like I've done a lot of stuff in between, right? And I was always looking for that next high, for that next dopamine hit, for that next, like, all right, I hit that goal, so I can be happy now, right?
Right,
And my happiness was always very conditioned, was always very conditioned on the goals that I achieved, and not really the process that I was undergoing. So it took me a long time getting to that point. And some people have it naturally, like, be happy if you do. I didn't. I kind of like worked my way towards it. That now, when I started this podcast around 5 months ago, I told myself, like, I do not, well, I've had a podcast in the past, so I know that I love podcasting. But this entire video and audio and cutting it and making clips and this entire world behind is not my world at all, or it hasn't been at all. So for me, I just told myself when I started, all right, I know my first couple of videos, they will suck, and I know they're going to be horrible qualitative wise. And that's going to be okay. I'm not going to stop my entire project just because I have a couple of bad pieces of content. So, what I said is that, all right, how can I improve myself without sticking too much or putting my head too much into that critical thinking mode of like quality control?
right,
Well, I'm just gonna take or record and post one piece of content every single day, which I have been doing now for the past 5 months, or for the past 4 months, just one piece of content every single day. And what it taught me is that throughout the process, I got to enjoy the pros, like my personal development, over the likes and over the shares and over the comments. Like I learned how to appreciate my process, and that process of just becoming better, of just seeing 1% improvement,
right.
1% improvement in the quality. That is my like check mark that my day is done. Like I'm good. I've gotten a little bit better instead of like, all right, this post only got like 8 likes and I don't know 200 views, but this other one, which was not as good, got like I don't know 100 likes and 6,000 views. It's not about that at all. It's just about becoming better in the process and having not goals that are attached to things that are actually not really in your control,
Just gonna
but
say that out
rather,
of
yeah,
control. Yeah,
yeah,
absolutely.
but actually things that are inside of your control, like what you can do right now.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that was so powerful about the goals thing that I learned from them. And as you were saying, but I'd say the third thing, which was a big takeaway, which I think everyone can do. I think this is actually the biggest gift the world could learn from my experience with hunter-gatherer tribes is solitude, right? Like we live in this world where, especially our generation, people spend like zero time alone. Like they'll be like, "Oh, I'm spending time alone." I'm like, "Bullshit!" Like you've got music in your ears, or you're watching Netflix. Like you're not actually spending time alone. I mean, like spending time alone with just your thoughts. So what's this to do with the Warani? So like, what was super fascinating about them was they would they would like go and hunt early morning, and they'd be back at like 10, and like the rest of the day not do much. Like, they would literally just like sit in like a natural made hammock for like hours, and I would just watch them. I'm like, gosh, aren't they so bored? They would just sit alone, but you could tell they were having a good time in their head. Like it's not like they were smiling the whole time, but you could tell they were super relaxed. And I was like, wow, so fascinating. And it got me thinking. I was like, these guys don't seem stressed at all. And the kind of conclusion I came to was a quiet mind is a happy mind. Like these guys spend so much time alone, they're just comfortable with their own thoughts. And whereas like in the modern world, it's like we most people spend no time alone, and they're constantly looking for ways to distract themselves from sitting with their thoughts. And it often again involves consumerism. Like, I don't know, I'm gonna go spend money on buying clothes that will distract me from my thoughts. Or I'm gonna go to the cinema and spend money on a cinema ticket to distract me from my thoughts. Or I'm gonna go to a virtual reality center and spend money to like distract me from being from my thoughts. And it's actually like with these hunter gatherers, what I learned is just like just sit there and be alone with your mind and just get a bit of self-awareness. And that is real happiness if you can just be sat alone
Huh,
for hours with
huh.
your mind. Um, and I was that was the biggest thing I'd actually say I learned from my stay with the Warani tribe. And I think that, like I said before I introduced this point, I believe that's like the biggest thing our generation could benefit from incorporating. Like just spend 30 minutes a day with no stimuli. Just you and your mind and see what comes up. And even if you don't like what comes up,
Mm,
sit with it enough and you'll come to peace with it.
mm. I always love the quote, the best things in life are come for free, you know?
Yeah,
The best things in life come for free, and you don't, if you need to pay money for it, there is a condition behind. And it's not, I mean, obviously you have to pay money to visit the Warani if you're not living in Ecuador, right? It's right, it's okay, it's natural, but the finding happiness of mind and that peace of mind, you don't need to purchase any Calm app, any Headway, any whatsoever. You don't need to spend any money on that. Just learn how to be in silence. And through that silence, happiness will come. But we've been
yeah,
sidetracking now a little bit. We've been sidetracking now. I want to get back into the, Ecuadorian rainforest of the Warani tribe. So one thing that I'm wondering. Okay, so there's actually 3 points that I want to get into. Number
right.
one, food, because I'm a big foodie, and I'm very curious what's if someone like me would actually be able to survive in that rainforest living with them, right? Because I work out a lot, I have like my diet, my like
Right.
my regiment, and so on and so on. So my first question would be, I guess your last trip to the supermarket where you bought the last Western food, that food didn't last the
No.
entire 8 to 10 days, right? That was over quite fast. So, what were some things that you were eating, so that they cooked for you? What is like the typical meals that you
Yeah.
encountered, and how did your body react to it? I
Mm,
guess because it's so like it's not normal for us because it's different
yeah.
foods, different herbs, different whatever.
Sure. For sure. So I guess from a high level, that any like dish is basically a combination of a source of protein, so meat, with yuca, which is cassava,
Mm,
right? It's like a root. So they would kind of like boil or deep fry the yuca, and yeah, you would have that with a source of meat. So what's the source of meat? There, if like in our world, like the thing, like kids get most excited about is like, oh, we're gonna have a hamburger, or we're gonna have
Hmm.
steaks. I don't know. Their equivalent is, oh, we're gonna have monkey. So
Yeah.
that is like their like the kids running in the sky, jumping up and down, being super happy. It's monkey. Then there's wild boar, which is called wangana.
Hmm.
That's a common one. They eat like different kinds of birds too, like toucans, parrots even, um, caimans, which are like small crocodiles. Then there's something called a capybara they eat as well. And there's an
Hmm.
Amazonian kind of like capybara thing called a wanta. So like those are like the main sources of protein. Monkey, capybara, wild boar, toucans, and monkey.
Pretty much just everything that you can find, because I guess they're not really picky in the sense of if that's the only source of meat that you will find in that day, they're not like, well, that's not on the list that we want to have, right? So we just,
Yeah,
you know,
they don't eat jaguars because
okay,
they like believe that jaguars are like their ancestors. Like when someone
spirit
dies, they
animals. Yeah.
reincarnate into the jaguar spirits. They don't eat
Wow.
jaguars and they
Wow.
don't eat snakes either. But most other things, tapirs as well, they eat. Yeah, most other things they eat. Yeah.
So, what was your experience? Because I guess you were not all you in the beginning. You had to connect a little bit with the children to kind of
Mhm.
like get a close bond with the elders. But I guess on your travel or on your stay with the Warani, I bet you went hunting with them as well.
Yeah.
And you got to experience them hunting. And first off, like in the documentary, you see a lot that they do not wear any clothes when they're in the forest, right?
Mhm.
Is that accurate, or was that only depicted for those purposes of like
No,
the
so
documentary?
that's actually interesting. So like nowadays, when we're in the community, the majority wear clothes. I mean, very basic, like a pair of shorts and maybe a t-shirt.
Okay.
However, when they go hunting, they take everything off. And like that's not like for, for the camera. And the reason
Why is
why they
that?
do that,
Yeah.
yeah, and that's a great question. And kind of as I explained it, you'd be like, oh yeah, that makes sense. Is that hunting, like what people don't realize is everyone wants to go hunting. And when you go and it's like, oh my gosh, this is so intense because you are hunting for maybe 3, 4 hours and it's really hot and sweaty and you're chasing an animal, you get hot. So have no clothes on, right? Like that's literally the reason why they hunt naked because it's just cooler that way, and they can move faster.
Interesting.
So you
And
see what I mean? It's
they
kind of obvious now that I told you, but at first you're kind of like, why?
well, I mean, maybe they wanna worship the tradition or what. Like I thought it's like tradition or it's kind of like the typical thing. It gives them kind of like more this incognito feeling, like chameleon type
Right.
of I'm fitting into the forest. But I think that part makes so much sense. It makes so much sense. Yeah, I guess true. And you don't want anything to hold you back, right?
Exactly.
If your clothes get somehow stuck on a branch or on a vine or whatsoever. Okay, so they hunt naked, but do they wear any shoes?
No,
No shoes.
no shoes.
Did you follow the regiment when you went hunting with them
Indeed, I did.
without shoes?
Yeah, barefoot.
How was that? How was that? How was it
Naive
barefoot?
of me to do so. I did it, and like it was fine. I even went hunting once at night barefoot, and I was like, that's so stupid because we went did see a snake, and I was like, gosh, I could step on anything, but they're just not, they aren't scared at all. But so I did it, but then I was like, that's naive, and oh my gosh, like I had some thorn go through my foot as well. But they're just resistant to it. And again, like they don't use shoes because often when they hunt the monkey, like the monkey gets caught up in the tree, right?
Hmm.
So they need to literally climb up the tree and get it. And their feet are, I don't know if you saw this in part of your research, but like the Guarani have the most like unique feet in the world without sounding creepy. They have very flat and wide feet, and it's just because of the fact they've always climbing trees. Like their feet are basically made for climbing trees. They have amazing grip strength with their feet. So I feel like they would actually
Wow.
wearing shoes would be a hindrance on their ability to climb trees.
It makes so much sense, and I think just just because our feet now look the way they look, it's because the evolutionary process of us has been over the past 1,000 years just to wear sandals, to wear shoes, to kind of like narrow down our feel, like our the width of our toe of our feet, and the kind of like muscles that we have in our toes. Like a lot of indigenous tribes, what I've actually last year I've spent a lot of time digging into this kind of matter, where you know how these barefoot, like what are they called,
Oh,
those
the barefoot
barefoot
shoes.
shoes,
Yeah,
barefoot shoes are really getting into trend again. Why? Because we are losing the natural ability of our feet. Like normally your feet are supposed to be like widespread and you can move every single muscle of, or every
yeah,
single bone of them. We can't do that anymore, right? We have lost complete touch with nature, complete touch with our like natural reflexes, right? So
yeah.
it's I guess it's different. So um did you ever have any close calls or encounters with rainforest wildlife? And if you did, like spill the tea on the craziest experience that you've had while hunting with them.
So I didn't have any close calls while specifically hunting, but I definitely had some incidents with nature in the Amazon. And I've had three. Two of them were quite intense.
Hmm.
So one was that I got, it's gonna sound silly, but I grabbed the tarantula with my hands. Because I've done it before, and it's like nothing normally happens, and like it just
Hmm.
chills on your body and it's fine. But there's
Hmm.
a way to like kind of play with the tarantula, and I messed up, and this tarantula bit me. I
Hmm.
like stung me. And like the first thing you're thinking is like, I knew this is not a venomous one, like one might can kill you, but it's like, when it happens, that's the first thing which comes to mind. Like you're like confuse it. So I'm like to someone, I'm like, is this one safe? Like, yeah, it's fine. But oh my gosh, like the pain was super strong, and you just feel this venom like going through your body. And I just started feeling lightheaded. And your mind starts overthinking, right? Because you're so far away from a hospital or anything. And you
Hmm.
just start kind of overthinking, like, okay, I've been bitten by a tarantula. I can feel my like energies become depleted. Am I gonna be okay? So that was the first time. Second time was a caiman is like a small crocodile, like it's maybe like this big, and
Hmm.
you catch it with your hands. Like the way you do it is they come out at night and you shine a torch on them, and that blinds them. So if you kind of shine a torch on them, they can't see you, and then you go grab their neck, and that's like how you catch them. So I caught one and it moved and it slipped out of my hand and my finger went in its mouth. And but like, honestly, it just like was like a little cut. But oh my gosh, the teeth were sharp and its mouth really came down quick. But like, for some reason, it didn't really pierce the skin, it just grazed it. But that was a bit intense. And then the most intense one I've had is I got stung by a stingray. And that was painful and scary because when I got stung by the stingray, the first thing which came to mind was what's that Australian guy's name? Steve Owen, is it? Who
Steve
died?
Owen, yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
who died from the stingray bite. And I knew that was like a ginormous stingray and it was in his chest. But again, like in the moment, you overthink. So I got
Hmm.
stung by the stingray like in my foot, and I literally felt it go up my calf, up my groin, into my stomach. I was like, oh my gosh, it's gonna hit my chest. And what they did, like, was like, we need to kill the venom. So they literally like made a fire and burnt my foot with fire to kill the venom. And then they got me to submerge my foot in boiling water for like 2 hours. Like, even if you don't have an open wound, if I literally boiled the kettle for you and said submerge your foot in it or your hand in it, it's gonna hurt. Can you imagine doing that
Hmm.
with an open wound too?
Oh,
So yeah, the stingray
uh,
was the most intense encounter I've had with nature.
wow, that's pretty crazy. So how did your foot
Oh,
end
and I
up?
had a
Like what?
piranha as well. We went piranha fishing, and you take the piranha with your hand
Mhm.
once you caught it, and it bit me once as well. So yeah, four incidents.
So what would you say? Because you've named a couple now. So what are some? Would you say? Because we didn't even get to the part now that you kind of you've we've only been on that 10-day trip now. We haven't even talked that you've been going back and forth, back and forth. I would love to touch on that a little bit as well. But I guess if we're since we're already on it, it's like you've mentioned a few now. But what are some survival skills that you learned from the Warani? and maybe some like secret language phrases that people at home can try? Like, what are some things that you can bring with you now and say like, those are the things that I learned and they will stick with me forever?
I think it's more just even more enhanced belief of just trust your instinct, right?
Hmm.
Because like over here, maybe your instinct will say something, but you want to check it by, I don't know, like looking up on a map or Googling something. But there you can't do that. And just like trust your intuition, your instinct. I think the jungle teaches you that, especially when you're trying to navigate it. And I
Hmm.
guess survival skills, like just resilience, really. Like when I can shower in rivers and like the river is pitch black and you're like, oh, the anaconda's in there or whatever. Or sleeping on a hard wooden floor. It just tough, it thickens your skin, right? And I think that, being more tough mentally is just pays dividends in normal life, right? Because like less
Hmm.
lazy, you know? And it's just kind of like the same reason why someone who's been, I don't know, like in the army, probably just finds the normal life less challenging because they're just used to like dealing with more challenging things. So I think it's that same kind of experience. And then obviously, um, I've learned, how to like make a natural fishing rod from a branch.
Hmm.
Or I learned, how to like cook turtles, things like that. Just different things. Not that that's going to be useful in the modern world, but these kinds of different things I got exposed to.
You never know. You never know.
Yeah,
You never know.
yeah,
Wow. Wow, that's incredible. I can imagine, like, I think the mental resilience, like the things that you can't see with the eyes are like the things that there have had the most significance for you,
right.
like mental resilience, like communication skills, like pushing through
Independent.
pain.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it's those
independence.
intangible things which are like the biggest takeaways. That's why I say to anyone,
Hmm.
if you ever like go to these places, like people go, oh, I want to see the animals, I want to like see how they hunt, but like forget the external stuff. The biggest thing, and this is why it's a life-changing experience, is if you go for like a week or 10 days, it'll
Hmm.
just change the way you view life. And yeah, it's hard to explain until you've lived it. But
Hmm.
everyone says it's transformative experience.
I can imagine it would definitely be something that I would love to do. It's on my bucket list, and maybe in the future we can make something happen in
Yeah,
that direction because you have the contacts. It would be an absolute pleasure. But again, this puts me to the next part, the next
right.
part that I want to ask you, because now the listeners have heard how like that you've after 8 days you've encountered the Warani, you stayed with them for 10 days, right? That's nearly the end of your 3 week trip, but that's not the end of your cooperation and your relationship with the
Right.
Warani, right?
Yeah.
So in a nutshell, because I know we've already easily surpassed that 1 hour conversation, and I think we could easily go for another hour because I have enough questions up in my mind. Is that so you told me that when you came back, you started creating this type of cooperation with the Warani, and
Yeah.
you kind of like serving or bringing people, bringing more awareness to the Warani, and therefore in that way helping their economy to kind of like be able to purchase more, be able to like afford more, right? And bring tourist groups, tourists, whosoever into the Amazonian rainforest. Can you like rephrase that in your word, like what actually happened after that, and how long has that entire cooperation lasted with you and them?
Yeah, because I imagine, like when people kind of hear this, they're thinking, oh, why is he going to these kind of tribes and leave them alone and stuff like that? And I had that same mindset too. And I think there's one thing worth clarifying is this wasn't an untouched community. So unfortunately, these communities have been contacted, like that Western interaction's already been done. Like they already had engines for their boats, or they even already have Wi-Fi in some of these communities because the missionaries and petrol companies, the way they kind of
Hmm.
brainwash these people into being able to manipulate them is by giving them gifts. So it's not like there's no Western influence that's already there.
Hmm.
And so I would never go to a place where they literally hadn't been contacted before. And what I found was when I was there, they really were excited by me being there, and they wanted me to raise awareness and bring people there. And I asked why, and they said because their land is constantly being exploited for logging, mining, like petrol, oil, all of those different kinds of things. And I said, what's the solution? And they said, well, we want to bring people here to raise awareness about what's happening to our land. And secondly, we want to have money so that we can pay like lawyers, right, to defend the land. So
Hmm.
I thought to myself, like, this would be cool. Like I got here because I was that tourist who wanted a real experience in the Amazon and was disappointed because I couldn't find it. So this is an opportunity to offer like an incredible experience, excuse me, for the Westerner. We have an incredible adventure, but it's also kind of like a retreat where you go deep in your mind and reflect on life and see a different way of living. And at the same time, it raises awareness for the Warani community, and we can obviously be charging the tourists. A portion of that money can go into paying a legal fees to protect the land. So that's what happened. And we started, and it started off by me essentially staying in like the main hostels in like the city in Ecuador and basically like framing myself as another backpacker and basically seeing who was planning to go to the Amazon, and I would be like, come with me. So that's how it started. But then it just kind of grew quickly. Like I had like a lot of Israelis after they do their national service, they go traveling in Latin America. It's a big thing for them, and I got like a contract with this huge travel agency in Israel. So I started having Israeli clients, and then all sorts of different people came to the jungle, and it really grew. But that's essentially how it started, and we reached a point where I should know the exact date, but I want to say it was July of 2023. Ecuador finally passed a law that the Yasuni region of the Amazon, which is where the Guarani is, it's now illegal to like exploit the land for natural resources. So
Wow.
I'm not saying that's definitely not like 100% down to the work we did, but it
Hmm.
contributed for sure. Because of like the exposure we were able to create through these different videos,
Wow.
taking
That's
communities.
that's amazing.
Yeah.
That's amazing. So, and now there's one more bigger point in the room that we haven't discussed yet, and that you've mentioned to me. Where, I was very curious of how I'm very curious how that came to play, because at a certain point, I guess along the way, um, National Geographic became aware of that situation with the Warani as well, right? If I'm not mistaken. Um, how did that entire part of that story come to play, and how were you involved with that?
Yeah, so when was this now? It's 2 years ago. Yeah, so in the summer of 2022, um, a local Ecuadorian, I guess, TV company essentially got in contact with us because they said National Geographic wants to come and do a documentary in the Amazon,
Hmm.
and there's a documentary featuring Will Smith. So, like National Geographic had contacted this Ecuadorian like TV channel, right? And then the TV channel knew about our Instagram page and they contacted us. It's kind of like middleman to middleman, right? And so I kind of started like organizing this trip and experience and for them. And National Geographic came for like 2 weeks to do filming, and Will Smith was there for 3 days. They created a documentary. It was meant to come out end of 2023. It's still not out. And yeah, I mean, I don't really know much about like what it's going to look like and what's going to be involved because last minute, I guess it's all bureaucracy, but they told me, yeah, like when Will Smith comes, when we're filming, I could be there. But then like last minute, they're like, no, you're not allowed to be there. Like no Western people, which is fine
Hmm.
for me. Like my motivation wasn't about, like get me on camera or anything, or I don't care
Hmm.
about Will Smith. It was more about like how this awareness can really help the community and just the Amazon as a whole. So yeah, my role was essentially just logistics, right? Because what was really sneaky is obviously they're going to make so much money from the documentary. They wanted to pay so little to the tribe and the communities and things like that. So yeah, that was my role. Essentially just helping with the logistics. But yeah, to this day, we're still waiting for that documentary to come out. But yeah, Will Smith came and also we had some other big YouTubers, which I think, most listeners will know, like Showman, is that American guy who speaks millions of languages, notably Chinese, right? So he came there and he learned the Warani indigenous language for that trip. We took a whole bunch of other YouTubers too. And to date, like across all of the videos from YouTubers we've taken, it's in excess of 40 million views now. So it's pretty
Incredible.
crazy how this all started from me just being curious, right? And like going to the Amazon with the Navy to then trying to make it a thing by like hanging out in hostels and trying to like poach people to come with me to then, yeah, it led to one thing led to another. And All these
It's
YouTubers and then banning mining and stuff like that in the Amazon, which, like I said, I'm not saying is 100% down to us, but it definitely
Mhm,
contributes.
mhm, mhm, mhm. That's incredible, man. And I think once you start trusting your intuition more and more, like life is your oyster. You never know at the end of the day how the end of the day will look like if you just go with your gut instinct and say like, well, if everybody tells me I'm going to die in the Amazonian rainforest, let me prove them wrong and see what happens along the way. I think that's always like the start of a beautiful story and experience. And
Right.
I think it's so magical. It's so beautiful. Like me myself, I've only been like when it comes to Southern Central America, I've only been in Mexico
Mm.
once, and that was more of a holiday, right? Not really like
Where
into
were
the
you?
jungles.
Cancun?
No, Puerto Vallarta
Okay.
on the other side, which was it was cool. We got to experience a little bit of local life, but like for me, I'm someone like you. I want to get into the depth, right? That's what I do. Why I do the podcast. Like I like to ask uncomfortable questions. I like to go a little
Right.
bit deeper behind the scenes, and for me, it's definitely part of my path to within the next years to come to be able to travel, to be able to do the things that you have done, right? And this is the cool thing, and for probably the listeners who don't know you, and for probably the listeners who do know you, they know, well, that's not the only thing that Nima has done right there. And I said already that we will have a multiple parts series of this podcast with you, Nima, because the things that you have experienced at, let's say, such a young age is like absolutely incredible, because I think a lot of people in their lifetime want to experience one of those experiences. And what would you say, what do these experiences have in common? Like what part of you can account for these things to have
Mhm.
happened? Like what's the learning lesson here if you want to live life in its full extent? What are the
Yeah.
mental thoughts and processes?
Yeah. I think obviously we've not shared them yet, but these kind of different experiences you're talking about that we'll talk about, I believe they are things which 95% of people in their mind have once had the curiosity of like, I would like to experience that. So let's just use the Amazon experience. I'm pretty sure like 99% of people on this planet have had the thought of, I wonder what it's like to go to the Amazon or live with a tribe.
Hmm.
I just make it happen. I think that's what it is. It's like I'm just a person where like if a desire comes into my head, like I want to make that desire a reality.
Hmm.
I
Hmm.
think, so for me it kind of seems simple. It's like what do you crave? What do you wish to do? And go make it happen. I think what I've learned is of course I feel fear, but I think I'm much more immune to fear than most people. Because like if I want to
Hmm.
do something, like I'll just go for it. So I think that's what it is really.
Having the guts to go beyond that barrier of fear and just say, actually, I will only know what fear really feels like and what it actually is once it's staring me right back into the face.
Yeah, and half the time, like the fear was just like I don't even feel fear in the moment. It's just like some limiting belief which came up in my head. Like just use the Amazon example. Like going there, you're like, oh, this is scary. Like, are they gonna attack me? Is it gonna be dangerous? You go there and it's super chill. And I'm
Hmm.
sure like if I took you, Tim, you'd get there and be like, oh, it's nothing scary about this. It's intense. Like, yeah, the weather can get intense. So like eating like some wild animal can be intense, but like
Hmm.
never had anyone really be there and be like, I'm scared. So I think it's just, and I think that's just a metaphor of like the human experience. Like most humans just we suffer from fear and self doubt. Those are the two biggest limitations. And if you can find a way to just defeat that feeling of fear and self doubt in your mind, then you actually end up living a life which aligns more with what you actually want to do. And I think that leads to a much more fruitful and happy life.
That's beautiful. That's beautiful. I really love that concept and that ideology. When it comes to, because I don't know you fully, right? I don't know how you were raised, what your childhood was like, what your teenage years were like. Maybe you were like the guy that always went face first and didn't think about the consequences of his actions before actually doing them, right? Maybe that's contributed to that version of you now that just knows how to overcome fear much easier. I know if I take me now for as an example, like my experience is that I've always been very cautious. Like
Mm,
I take predictable risks, right? Like if I knew, or if I know there is a chance of, shit can go very south very fast, I'm like, well, let me dissect a little bit deeper and see if this is
Yeah,
worth the risk. You know what I mean? But
yeah, absolutely.
naturally for some reason, life has pulled me into situations, into experiences, into moments, um, that just brought out, like, that was so crazy and so wild, in Mexico, for example, or in New York, for example, like things that for example, I didn't choose naturally, but as they were happening, I was not scared in the sense of I need to pull out of this and like avoid, but like, well, this is actually fun. Let's see where this takes me, right? So I think I have a similar approach, and over the years now, as I know that those scary situations happen to me and I'm not scared of them, I embrace them. I have a lot of stories to tell. Like, I
There
don't know
you go.
about you.
I
I don't
think
know
it,
about you.
yeah, it makes
Yeah.
life more fun, and I feel like, yeah, like I love experiences. Like I feel like that actually makes me the most happy. Like the more
Yeah.
experiences I have, the better. Like
Yeah.
different experience and the more variety it has. So I think, and it gets contagious. Like it sounds like you
Hmm.
had a taste of those things, and it's like the first
Hmm.
or second time, and it was you liked it, and now you probably get a
Hmm.
bit of a taste for it, and you'll see
100%.
more.
100%, because I don't know about you, but my life goal, like, I think in a certain way, a big goal for me is to have a family and to be able to raise that family very well. I have grandkids and so on. And
Uh-huh.
I have had I've had since 9 years now, since I went on that journey of personal development. I started, like, I quit university to become independent, to start my own business, travel, and so on
Right.
and so on. Since that day, 9 years ago, I've had that dream. And for me, it's like a dream very far into the future, where I see myself sitting with my grandchildren at a open fireplace in a big house that I've earned, right? That I've passed on to
Right.
my children as well. And I sit with them along the fireplace, and I don't watch TV with them. They don't get to watch TV. They
Good.
don't get to they don't get to do any of these things that are, like, not based upon, like, the raw experiences and stories
That's
that I have to tell. And I just sit there with them, and evening by evening I just tell them stories, my stories. And hopefully with my kids, I get to experience those things too, so they can, instead of putting their children in front of iPads and TVs, actually share stories with them, real life stories that have impact and value for them too. So
that
that's
that
like one of my, you
yeah.
know
That's
biggest
so
biggest
funny
biggest goals.
because I have the same thing where it's like the driver, and I guess everyone could apply this, is live a life, right? Which will put you in a position to just entertain your grandchildren for weeks and weeks through stories, pictures, and videos.
uh,
And so every now and then check in with yourself, maybe every
mhm,
quarter, and be like, have I developed enough content or stories for my
mhm,
grandchildren? If the answer is
mhm.
no, then seek a life more of experiences. So
Go
yeah, it's
out,
funny you say
go
that.
out.
The same, I'm
Yeah.
the same.
And for me, I like that last sentence that you just said. I feel that point right now. So I know, like, with the podcast, of course, I do get a sense of fulfillment because I get to
Right.
experience, and, like, I'm a very visual person. I can picture things very
Mhm.
clear, in front of me. So I'm already diving into other people's worlds. But I feel for myself that soon that it's time again for a little adventure. So again, I guess maybe after this podcast we can quickly talk a little bit about this, because I do have some plans, and maybe you're like the right person to get to
So
like help me with that. Um, but as a little teaser before we round it off,
yeah,
because I slowly we slowly find an end to this, but as a little teaser, maybe for the next talks that we have, what are one or two, or what are the other two examples that you've mentioned to me? Could you just summarize them in a nutshell so the audience knows a little bit what to expect on the next 90-minute dive that we will be getting into?
yeah. Um,
Because I guess living and working with indigenous tribes in the Amazonian rainforest in Ecuador was not enough. Nima had to put one on top. He had to go a little bit further. So shoot.
yeah, I guess there's two really which comes to mind. But two is, we're all very aware of the kind of migration situation. I guess in Europe, we're more aware of that kind of migration, which is more Africa or Middle East coming to Europe or UK via, Western Europe. But like in America, it's obviously Latinos, right? all aware of it. And I was like curious, like, what is that journey like? And what motivates, like, what goes on in people's lives back home that they're motivated to literally take like a deadly journey? So I thought, why don't I find out for myself? And I walked with migrants from Venezuela towards the US border. So that's one. And then the other one is, again, I'm sure everyone can relate to this. When you're like a teenager and you'd see on Netflix like these documentaries of these gang members with tattoos all over their faces. And I don't know about you, but I was always thinking like, gosh, like what goes on in their world? Like what went on in their life that they decided like I want to have my face fully tattooed? So I went and to El Salvador because at the time I was in London. I was like, oh, this is my rebellion phase. I was like, it's so safe and boring here. I just Googled most dangerous countries in the world. So I came up with Honduras and El Salvador. So I went there and I found these gang members and went and stayed with them and stayed in prison voluntarily with them for a few days. So yeah, those are the two different things which I guess we'll deep dive in further next time.
Ah, I love it. I love it, man. And again, your story and your stories, they are the reason why I love doing what I do. I just gotta say it, right? Because it's just like I see it so clear in front of me, and I'm like a little child right now, looking at the grandpa being like, "Tell me that story, come on, please," you know. That's pretty cool, amazing, man. And first of all, because I have one more question,
Yeah,
or actually two more questions, one related and one a little bit unrelated. But first of all, I want to again thank you for making this happen. For taking the time, because I know you're busy. I know you're busy. I know you're busy running your business, and I know you're busy with all of the things that are happening in your life. So first of all, thank you for taking the time, and
likewise.
sharing all of this. I know we've probably left out a lot of details, and there's so much more to dive into. But hey, like an hour 20, an hour 30 is already a good introduction into that world. And
Right.
um, first of all, where or what can people that are now like, wow, I want to find out more about this world, I want to dive deeper into this world, what are some of the resources that you can give to people that they can check out, maybe that has relation to the tribes that you have been living with, right? You mentioned some YouTubers in the past, maybe you can bring them up again. And where can people reach out to you? Where can people find you? Like, if you want to, feel free to, like plug your socials, plug your whatever, if you have a website whatsoever, so people can like, get into further contact with you and find out more about what else you do in your life.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I find like anyone who has an interest in like these kinds of things and like the self-development which comes from it or just living unique experiences, like I love being a facilitator. So yeah, I'm more than happy to leave like the Instagram page or even my WhatsApp. I'm super easy. And anyone who's
That's
kind
up to you. That's
anyone
up
who's
to you,
got a
because
kind of curiosity to learn more, I love, facilitating that.
cool. So drop them down below if you want. Like name them. I can put them in the descriptions later. And yeah, like just some resources that you would recommend to find out more about the Warani tribe and your time with them.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, that'd be super cool. I mean, the Instagram, it's a bit of a mouthful, but Amazon Wareka Expeditions. So you'll see that there. And then my Instagram is nima.t.97, but I guess, Tim, you'll be able to put it in the
Hmm,
description of
hmm,
this. And
hmm.
yeah, if you're curious, guys, I reply with voice notes. So if you don't like voice notes, maybe don't reach out to me. But yeah, feel free to send whatever and I'll get back to you when I can.
Amazing. Wow. So, second to last question, a little bit related to the topic. So, if we want to end on a high note, did you bring back any like amazing souvenirs or similar, or like experiences from your time with the Warani?
I did. I don't have it on me here in this house, but so how can I say it? So what they hunt with is called it's a blowpipe cerbetana, which is made out of like a tree, and it's like 3 meters long. It's huge. Maybe you can find a picture and pin it
Hmm,
somewhere in this post.
hmm.
But they make like a small one, maybe like this big, as a souvenir. So I took that, and that's super cool. Like having like a small blowpipe, and it has like its natural arrows. But apart from that, to be honest, no, I've never been really a souvenir person. I
Hmm.
like take the souvenirs through memories in my mind as opposed to some kind of physical tangible object.
Hmm. And I guess in that sense, you will have a 90-minute video that you can watch that is like a souvenir forever, because the internet does not forget.
That's true. That's true.
And now the last question. Last question before we end it off and before we round it off. It's a question that I like to ask everyone because, as you've kind of noticed a little bit as well, I do take very much pride in diving deeper into the kind of philosophical or personal development types of questions behind a story.
Yeah.
And now my question to you would be: imagine now that you would get the chance to meet a younger version of you, a younger version that might be struggling in the world, that doesn't really know what he wants yet, and it's just out there. What is like one piece of advice that you could now, when meeting this person, tell this younger version of you that you know now that you wish you would have known a little bit earlier?
Mm. Yeah. Just do you. But like the worst thing you can do is live a life that other people are telling you to live. So I really believe in that. Whatever like your desire is, do that. Don't get influenced by nobody else. Just do your life.
Beautiful. Wow. Thank you, Nima. Thank you for this time. Thank you for this beautiful 90 minutes of episode. I really appreciate the talk with you. I think you're um, a very kind person, and as well very open and easy to talk to. I mean, at first we were
Likewise.
thinking, yeah, and I mean the vibe is just good. And actually, I will be in London in July of this year. So maybe if you live close by, we get the chance to meet,
Sure.
and like connect in person. That'd be cool.
Yeah.
So yeah, but with this being said, if you have any other last words before we end it off.
Yeah, no, I just thank you to you because obviously, I did tell you I enjoy having challenging questions being asked or things like that. And it's rare to find people who are able to hold those kinds of conversations. So thank you to you
Mhm.
for being able to conduct this the way you did. It was good fun. I look forward to
with
the next ones.
with pleasure, and we will definitely make sure to schedule the next one very, very soon. So with this being said, thank you, Nima, for tuning in. Thank you, everyone, for listening. Have a beautiful rest of your day, and as we always say, see you in the next one.